I'm going to come up to you because I don't need to double up. Come on in. You're not too late. We're just about to get started. So my name is Michael Argast. I am the moderator of today's panel, which is something to do with careers in cybersecurity. Our objective really is to help you as students, recent graduates, or recent entrants into the industry find your path and find opportunities and be successful in finding those jobs and planning your career. I've been in cybersecurity for about 20 years, which usually means about everything I learned at the start of my career is now incorrect, and I have to forget it. And so I like to bring other people along to help correct all my fallacies. So I'm going to pass it along and let everybody introduce yourself. What I'd like to start with is maybe take a minute to talk about how you got started, what your first job was like, and how you made that first leap into cybersecurity. So Aashna, do you want to start us off? I would hold it up, yeah, because they're recording.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Aashna Ahluwalia, and I'm a security architect at VanCity Credit Union, locally based in Vancouver. My journey in cybersecurity began when I was studying at Quebec. I was doing my master's in electrical and computer engineering, and that's when I was exposed to cybersecurity, and I was super fascinated by it. So after that, I started looking up for aligning my subjects, aligning my research papers, and found a co-op in the BC Ministry of Citizen Services in their security team. And that's how I started my first job. From there, went on to do some security research at Oracle, Vancouver. It's a database company, but we were doing security research at that time. And then eventually went on to join VanCity. So, yeah.
Great, thanks. Dom?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dominic Vogel. I run my own consulting company, which up until recently was mostly just there as a tax write-off, but had a really good year this year, so yay me. In terms of my career, I've been in the field close to 15 years now, and it's funny, I was reflecting on this the other day that when I joined, it was, at least it seemed to me, to be a field ruled by pissed-off middle-aged white guys, which I'm slowly becoming one of them. But over the course of the 15 years, it's been great to see increased diversity across all levels, gender, ethnicity, experience. I think that's really good to be able to see how far we've come and the opportunity for how much more we can do from a diversity and inclusion perspective for the workforce. And that's just, I think that's something which is absolutely needed to solve so many problems that, Mike can attest to. The same problems that existed 20 years ago that still exist for whatever reason, we haven't been able to solve. And I think as we improve...
Passwords still suck.
As we improve on that diversity of thought and experience, that's really going to help solve a lot of these problems. And to answer Mike's question there, my first job actually came in the very early days, just as the sort of that Great Recession was just about to start. It hadn't quite started. But it was something which led to a lot of entry-level roles just being cut right out. When I graduated from university, I actually had to wait almost a full year to get my first job. It was a very tough process. I remember that so vividly now, because I remember I reached out to a lot of people asking for help, and so few people would take me up in terms of being able to mentor me or offer guidance. And flash forward to today, I remember that if I wasn't the stubborn SOB that I am, I could easily have ended up into another career field. So I'm always very open and very much enjoy mentoring and helping those who want to enter the field. So that's something that is very near and dear to me. Anyway, I can help those trying to enter the field. Like I said, please feel free to reach out. Like I said, my first job, I was actually someone who gave a chance on me. When I interviewed, he said, I'm going to pay you jack all. I was like, oh, great. Tell me more. And he said, but what I really love about you is your passion. You are incredibly passionate. And I can tell that you really want to learn, you want to grow, and this is something that excites you. And I said, yeah, I just want to be given a chance. And like I said, that's something which sticks with me all these years later. My first role was at CHC Helicopter, which is at the South Terminal at YVR. And it's like I said, there's a lot of early lessons that very much left a deep impression on me. And like I said, if in any capacity I'm able to help those who are trying to enter the workforce, I like to be able to pay that forward to help them.
Great. Rishabh?
Hi everyone, my name is Rishabh Bali. I'm currently with VanCity. How can I follow up with that? So my first job was in data center operations. I was literally taking tape backups. Like plugging the tape into the computer, waiting for the backup to happen, taking it out, writing the date on it. That was my first job. Pretty much a similar story to Dom. As soon as I graduated, that economic slump hit, so there was no entry-level jobs in the market. So I was happy just to get a job, which was in my field of study, which I did, which was computer science. So anything related to computers was okay with me. So that's how I started. And 16 years later, here I am in cybersecurity talking about it. So
Great. So I think one of the challenges that a lot of people face is like there's a lot of different things you can choose to learn in security, and where do I focus my time and energy to be successful in finding those jobs? It's a big field. I like to say it's not one job, it's 50 domains, and you can choose kind of where you want to land in that. Out of curiosity, how many of you would say that your initial job aspirations would be a technical role of some sort? Interesting. So would the rest of you be looking for a non-technical role or something else? Anybody else want to jump in with an alternative to a technical role?
IT assurance.
Okay, IT assurance, so compliance, GRC sort of work. So how many of you would say GRC, risk, compliance, that kind of thing? I expect to see within an ISACA group probably a fair number of hands, right? Cool. And so, you know, in my case, like I started as a sysadmin, network backbone operator, that kind of stuff. And so, you know, a lot of security professionals that are my age with the gray hair and all this kind of stuff come from networking sysadmin backgrounds. That's pretty common. But today, the skills and demands of people in security have changed. And so, you know, my question to the panel are, you know, what would you recommend if somebody was entering the field today are useful, applicable, transferable skills that would be, you know, areas of focus for, you know, a student or, you know, somebody who's, you know, kind of building their career. Since you've got the mic, why don't you start, Rishabh?
Sure. So I think from my experience and my perspective, having the technical skill set is the backbone on which you can build your career on. It's fairly important that you understand how technology works, what technology is interrelated to another technology, how the whole technology ecosystem works. And from there on, at least what I'm seeing over the last 3 years is the context of the business is missing. People or technologists just believe that you can plug in a tool and that will solve the problem. It doesn't happen that way. There's a process and people piece which needs to complement that and make a trifecta of that people, process, technology, which can really elevate. So coming back to your question, Michael, it's like, don't get me wrong, technical skills are super important, but that context-based, like reason-based technology as to what the technology is trying to solve. If you can develop that skill, you will be a superstar.
Business awareness, business context.
Just the context around which, why we are implementing this technology and what business problem will it solve.
Can you dive a little bit into like, so I'm a student, I've landed my first job at VanCity or somewhere else. How do I learn that business context? Like what is the approach that I would take as a student to pick that up?
So I was working in Accenture. I worked in Accenture for about 8 years. And you typically in a consulting environment, you're parachuted into a situation which is usually the house is on fire and you're trying to find a solution for that, and you have to come up with a solution within 3 weeks or 4 weeks. That's the usual time of an engagement. So what you start off with very basic. You start asking questions as to what were you trying to do, what was the desired outcome of it, and then you supplement those questions with processes. What was the process before you implemented the tool? What is the process after you implemented it? So the idea is that the more knowledge you have, the more context you build around that, and the problems will start to emerge on them by themselves. If you're able to connect the dots as to, okay, you were trying to solve X, but you ended up solving Y. So that you implemented a tool, it did something, that something, was it intended or accidental?
Cool, great. Dom, what would you like to add around skills to learn?
What I would like to add is, a lot of people refer to them as soft skills. I don't like that term. I'll refer to them as foundational skills. Something which I think is really overlooked is the whole notion of being able to be a good communicator. Especially, there's that stereotype in the technical ranks that IT people or security people are really crappy at communicating. And sometimes that's rightly justified, but being able to, I would say, really invest time in learning how to communicate, especially not to other technical people, but to non-technical people, especially if you're looking at this from a longer-term perspective for your career. As you go deeper and deeper into your career, you're going to spend more and more time with non-technical people. And I know right now, for me, one of the most important skills that I have developed over the years is my ability to communicate, and to communicate to all sorts of different audiences, whether that be an IT crowd, security crowd, young, old, what have you. I think that's a really important skill set. And the other one is, which is often overlooked in the business world, is the whole notion of empathy. When you're, regardless of who you're communicating with, the better you can understand their situation, where they're coming from, rather than trying to impose your will on them, that's going to help serve you very, very well in the long run. I can't tell you how many cybersecurity professionals I've worked with that when they're in a meeting with other business people, and there's some conflict or some issues, then they go full that shit crazy kind of thing. And am I allowed to swear on the panel? I wasn't sure. Okay. Anyway, yes.
You are being recorded.
I won't. And in terms of the fact that you're not winning yourself any supporters when you act in a way that you can't be empathetic, especially what Rashad was saying there, understand the business, right? Understand the context, right? Security doesn't happen in a vacuum. Just because they don't take your advice or not, they go against something that you said, that doesn't mean that your job is meaningless, right? You really need to understand and develop that skill set of empathy, because the better you can understand where other people are coming from, that will serve you very, very well as a professional, whether you're in the cybersecurity role or not.
Great. Aashna?
Just to add to both those points, it's very important to be open to learning. I think that skill is very important. You have to be open to learning anything that comes your way. Sometimes there are situations where you've been given the task and you have to do it, irrespective of you knowing or not, and that's when that skill comes most handy. So just being open to opportunities, taking initiative, taking that responsibility, sometimes is a very important skill.
Yeah, I would say that the superpower for any cybersecurity professional is like insatiable curiosity and a desire to learn, right? Like if you have that, you will go far in your career. If you don't have that, then this might not actually be the right career for you, because the reality is our industry is always changing, technology is always changing, threats are always changing, and so a desire to learn and like that insatiable, I'm always learning more, I'm reading a book, I'm reading a blog, I'm listening to a podcast, I'm watching a video, I'm coming to an event, like that constant desire to learn new stuff is what's going to serve you incredibly well throughout your career. I want to top up on some themes that were kind of added there. The whole batshit crazy thing is something that I have seen numerous times in my career, and I like to talk about security absolutionists versus security pragmatists, right? So typically early in your career, you've learned a bunch of stuff and you believe security needs to be done in a very specific way, and you get kind of a little bit upset when people don't want to listen to you wanting to do security in the right way. And this comes back to business context and understanding what the business is trying to achieve. You don't do the business or anybody else any good if you haven't developed the soft skills to communicate why this is so important, right? Why is it that I need to do this with a firewall? Like that if you can't communicate effectively through that, technical communication barrier, then it's going to be very difficult for you to get the resources, the time, the energy to solve those business problems. And so, unfortunately in our industry, there's brilliant people who are absolutionists who have poor communication skills, and they typically end up locking themselves in a way in a corner or a box somewhere, managed by somebody who knows how to apply those skills, but never exposed to light in the outside world. And so try not to paint yourself into that box. So I think the three panelists here have done a great job of talking about kind of, OSI layer 8 kind of skill sets. I want to top up with kind of OSI level 7 to 1. Traditionally, as I said, a lot of networking skills are really, really important. That's a foundational skill. I think other foundational skills today is code, right? Like everything is code these days. Your infrastructure is code, your applications are code, code dependencies, repositories, all this kind of stuff are critical in the security of an organization. And so, I think if you're going to be a technical security professional today, learning, Python, some coding language, having an understanding of, CI/CD processes and how all this stuff works is incredibly valuable. I think in the same way, data analytics is becoming more and more valuable. We live in a data-centric world. And so, there's some great free online courses if you want to learn about machine learning. Google's got a course online that you can go through in about 40 hours to self-study. There's tremendous programs out there. Just building an understanding about that stuff helps you be more effective at your job wherever you are in cybersecurity, because you're going to have to work with data and manage data and work through privacy and those sorts of things. So, code and data are two kind of things that I consider really key. And the third is cloud, right? And so I think Brian Krebs, if those of you saw his talk this morning, one of the first bullet points on recommendations is like, if you can learn cloud security architecture, your salary goes up $100,000 a year, right? Like that is such an in-demand field. There are so few people with those skills. And it doesn't take much to, spin up an Amazon or an Azure instance and play with the technology and become familiar with it. And so, I think my panel mates did a great job talking about, layer 8. And those are some layer 7 through 1 kind of recommendations that I would make. So next question. People out there looking for their first job, what would you recommend they do in order to be successful in landing that first job? Like, it's not just the training and skills that they've had, but what are other things that they can be doing in their hunt, in their pursuit, in their interview process that are going to help them stand out, be successful in finding a job? So Aashna, you want to start us off?
Yeah. So it's very important to stand out when you're going for that job interview. So always have this in mind, that what can I do or what can I add on my resume that will make me stand out. So just on the topic of code and how technology is evolving, you can participate in hackathons, you can participate in competitions like Capture the Flag. There are so many cyber competitions happening all around Canada and the world. So adding those things onto your resume definitely gives you an edge when you go for an interview. Think about how you can volunteer at different events, just like BC Aware. I remember I've come for BC Aware since the past 3 years, and I've come in different roles. I started coming here as a volunteer, then when I was a co-op student, then as an employee, and another as a panelist. So it's just been a whole circle for me. And every time I come here, I network with people, build my network, talk to different people about the different jobs, opportunities that are there in the market, try to understand what kind of skill they're looking for and if I'm a good fit for the job. So just do that market research when you're at these conferences. Don't be hesitant to talk to people. Just go out there, put yourself out there. Look around yourself in this room. The people around you will be your network if you connect with them at conferences like these. So it's a very important quality to network at these events while you're here. I think these two things, like networking and attending different conferences and volunteering, can definitely add an edge on your resume.
Great, thanks Aashna, good answer. Dom?
I'll tell you what not to do, and I hear this from so many students those looking to get into the job market is, all people come up to me and say, hey, you know what, I spend like 8 hours a day, 5 days a week applying to jobs online. I was like, wow, you just wasted your effing time. And the reason I say that is because we're in this spot now where there's just so many job postings online. People get overwhelmed by how much that there is, and you can see that all at your fingertips. But the thing is, and it's very much to your point, in which that's not interpersonal, it's not relational. We're literally trying to beat the HR machine. And just because I had a boring weekend once a couple weeks ago, I actually tried just for a laugh, trying applying to some of these jobs. And I never even got a call back for some of them, in which I knew I was qualified for. I couldn't get past the HR machine. I didn't try and optimize my resume, with the keywords and all that. I think it goes to show you that that is a very imperfect process. And in order to stand out, which was another thing that you mentioned there, don't waste that time hiding behind a computer. If you're going to invest that type of time, invest that time in networking. Use platforms like LinkedIn. Find people who have jobs that you would like to have one day, reach out to them, ask them questions. You'd be shocked by how many people are just open books when someone reaches out and asks, hey, what is it that you love about your career? And I can't tell you how awesome it is to have people reach out to me. That's often the highlight of my week, is when someone reaches out and says, I came across your profile on LinkedIn, or someone recommended you. I'd love to learn more about how I can get into the field. Right? Spending time, invest that time and energy in that will pay off 1,000-fold. You guys are already way ahead of the curve in which when you come to an event like this, to be able to learn, to be able to network, that's already a huge step. There's a lot of people who aren't taking that step. So keep taking that a step further. Reach out, try and accept with a mentor. I know ISAC
The mentor
program, which is absolutely fantastic. Take advantage of those types of situations, because I've found that learning from those who already have a career and long careers in the field, that's how you can learn. It's not really necessarily as cool as the movie Training Day. Does anyone remember that movie? No. Is this thing on? No? Okay.
You're a younger crowd, though.
Yeah. It's an awesome movie. I highly recommend it. It's Denzel Washington at his finest. But does no one know Denzel Washington? Anyway, before I make myself look more of a fool, really do take the time and invest on that. Don't waste time applying online. And again, if you find something a job that you found online that you would like to apply for it, but then try and find out, is there someone that I know who knows someone who works there? Actually, again, leverage your network. Don't just sit behind the HR machine and pray for the best.
Great. Rashad, anything to add?
Just to build on what both of my co-panelists have said, that I think for the students in the room, that I'm a student card is the best one you can have, and you should be cashing that out every opportunity to get. You'll be surprised by how many people are open to meeting the students and giving them guidance. If you just reach out to them on LinkedIn or send them an email through a co-contact, hey, I'm a student, I'm thinking about starting a career in X or Y, would you be willing to meet me for a coffee? You'll be surprised how many people are open to that. So use the network that you already have, build on your network on LinkedIn, and really use that student opportunity. And for the people who already have some experience behind them, but they're wanting to transition into cybersecurity, you already have half of the job is already done. You already have your network built out, so use that.
Yep. Great, thank you. Yeah, I consider networking like just a general career super skill in the same way that I mentioned curiosity is one for cybersecurity. And it's not just about finding a job, it's also like, I need to solve a technical problem, right? Like I can go and Google for that, but if I can find somebody in my network who's dealt with that problem before, who can tell me what blind alleys to avoid and all that kind of stuff, then my network can be incredibly powerful that as well. So, I think for many of us who work in the industry, we consider your ability to build relationships with others to be a critical success factor, because we're all in this together, right? The cyber criminals are certainly not working alone, right? And so in order for us to be effective, we need to leverage everybody in this room and everybody out there in order to be able to combat the threats that we face every day. So my kind of last question for the panel before we open up to the audience is, so some of you are in your first jobs, which is great, and hopefully the rest of you that are looking for jobs are going to get one relatively soon. So you're in your first job, you're excited, you're doing the things that you want to be doing. What advice do you have for somebody who is in their first job in cybersecurity that are going to help serve them well as they're kind of building their career and developing themselves? So you've got the mic, Rashad, so I'll let you start us off.
I might be a little biased in my opinion with that, but I think what has effectively worked for me is knowing my strengths and weaknesses. Knowing where I can leverage the skill set I have, and knowing, okay, I cannot do this, I need to reach out for help with someone. So knowing that actually helps tremendously and makes you a very powerful employee in a team or in a department. Because by reaching out, you're enabling the other person also, or him or her strength, and utilize that to a greater benefit. So knowing those two things and being very critical about it also effectively helps. Just to add on to that, I know perhaps in this panel I'm the least technical of all people. or at least I consider myself. So I know when I have a technical issue to solve, I should be reaching out to these folks. If there's an administrative problem, yeah, I can solve it probably myself.
Cool, great, thanks. Tom?
The thing that I would say is a really important tool to leverage is to not just restrain yourself to within your teams. Let's say you're within an IT team or security team or what have you. I found one of the best ways to really further my career was by developing relationships with those people outside of IT, whether that be in marketing, communications, the executive assistants. The more people I met within the business, and this is to Rashad's point, that really helped me learn more about the business. Right? If I could better understand what marketing did, what communications did, what the even within like I said, within the IT team, what do the software developers do? What does the network team do? Really trying to get out of your sort of your box, so to speak. And again, it doesn't mean like you have to go one by one to the different business units and walk and meet everyone, but taking those opportunities at the water cooler, lunchroom, what have you, to try and meet and network with those within your own company. That's something which served me really, really well in my corporate days and really helped from an exposure point of view, not just for me personally, but for the whole notion of cybersecurity. That allowed me to use that as a platform. And I remember back in my career in the credit union system, I still remember when I was starting to meet more people in the credit union that I worked for, so many of them said, wow, I didn't know we even had someone in cybersecurity. And again, it's a visibility problem. So being able to use that and leverage that, you'd be surprised how engaging some of those conversations would be. So really try and, again, go out of your comfort zone and not just stay with the technical people, as awesome as they may seem to be.
Great. I'm sure that will really help with the whole building business context as well, right? So,
Absolutely.
Aashna?
Yeah. Same idea. So we are always going to be collaborating with different teams, different people from different backgrounds, and we all need to be able to understand our language, right? There has to be a common language. Like we're working with risk, fraud, compliance teams all the time. So it's just taking the effort to collaborate with them, getting everyone on the same page, making them understanding the technical details in a non-technical way. So I think all these things add up to your communication powers. And especially if you're in your first year of your job, do take the opportunity to meet new people, even though they do not speak the same language in terms of technical language, or just they're doing something else in the business. Do take the opportunity to talk to people who are not from the same background, because you're going to learn so much from them in terms of what they do, what the business is, and what other opportunities are available in the market.
Great, thank you. I might top up by saying, especially early in your career, like cast a wide net and try to learn as many different things as you can. Most of us when we're young adults have no idea what our career is going to look like in 20 years. And the odds that we've picked the right job on day one are quite unlikely to be the case for 5-10 years down the road. And so don't be afraid to try a whole bunch of new things, pick up new skills. If your manager asks, hey, has anybody played with this technology? Go, no, but I'd love to, right? Like those sorts of opportunities exist every day in cybersecurity. Diversifying and broadening your skills quickly and early can be very valuable. And the other thing, which most managers and stuff would hate to tell people, is actually don't be afraid to change jobs a bit in your early career. Sometimes that hopping around gives you perspective and experience that's very hard. And when you're looking for that next great job, when you're in your 40s, you don't want to be hopping around every 2 months, every 12 months, every 24 months. But when you're 20s, everybody kind of just expects it. And it's okay if you've changed and had 3 or 4 different jobs before you're 28. That's kind of normal. And you're more likely to have picked up a diversity of experience that some future employer is really going to value. And so, that's just, kind of a top-up piece of advice. So those are kind of the core questions I wanted to have for the panel. But to the audience, what sort of questions do you have that would be valuable? Yes, on the left.
So I'm just curious, because cybersecurity is so broad. So I mean, if you get in a position, so for example, I'll just speak to what I'm curious about. Is I work in identity management.
Yeah.
But just looking to how I want to diversify into a different information security domain.
Mhm.
So how, with having no experience in that specific domain, what is a good way, like from a hiring manager perspective, beyond certifications? Is there anything else that I could speak to, or is there a way that hiring managers may consider other, or are certifications enough, or is there something else that the hiring manager would need to consider from that standpoint?
Yeah, who wants to start?
So I spent an insane amount of time
Take the mic.
in identity and access management. So I think what you can do is probably in your current job, speak to your manager saying that, hey, I have this skill, but I'm interested in learning more. And most often than not, you'll get either two of answers. One answer would be, I understand that, but right now this needs to be done. So you take care of while we work out how to transition you off, or you just say that flat out no. So you know the answer one way or the other, but reaching out and just opening up that possibility of saying that, hey, I'd like to learn more about this. Can I shadow someone else in the team? I just want to learn about what are the different areas. Maybe you're interested in networking side, maybe you're interested in operations side, maybe you're interested in compliance side. So just open up that, just having that initial conversation, I think that can open up a whole lot of doors.
Cool. Either of you want to top up at all?
Yeah, no, I think just to talk about what he was saying, I think having clear communication lines with your manager is a really important piece there. Again, just speaking from personal experience, wasn't quite in identity management, but again, early on in my career, especially my first job, I was just focused on endpoint protection. That's all my job was, to take care of the McAfee solution for the company, and I obviously wanted to do more. I've been doing that for almost 18 months, and I was getting a little bored of it. And just having an open and frank conversation with my manager about how I wanted to learn more, about wanting to try other things. He said, yeah, you should have come to me sooner. You seemed happy. And, I was like, wow, okay. So I would highly advocate that, just often just ask, and just, again, if you don't ask, you don't get something in return. So hopefully hope for the best, and there's that opportunity that you can shadow or experiment in other areas.
Aashna, anything to add?
I think that's okay. You just have to ask first, because no one else is going to ask for you, right? So
Yeah.
until
And
you make the first move, things won't change.
And generally speaking, if you get that second answer from your boss, it's probably time to start looking for a new boss. Like, frankly, if you have a boss who isn't supportive of your development, and there's lots of free options, they don't all have to cost money. You're in an industry that requires constant development to maintain your skills. And so that's a big warning sign, red flag from an employment perspective. The other thing I would top up with is look for connective tissue. And so identity and access management is a core central piece to all sorts of different aspects of information security. So say, for example, you're interested in cloud. I can tell you, for example, that 80% of breaches on cloud start with an IAM problem, right? And so, if you understand IAM, then you understand one of the core elements of cloud security, and you can pivot that into learning more and getting more involved in those sorts of projects, right? So, that might lead to, all right, so you'd have to pick whatever it is that you're interested in getting into next. Talk to your network, an expert who's in that field to help you make those connections, and then you can sell that opportunity to your bosses and employers and stuff like that. Next question. Hopefully that was helpful. Yes, in the back?
So if I want to learn any SIM technology, so which is the best technology in Canada widely used? Is it ArcSight or Splunk? Because if I have some knowledge of ArcSight, and if I'm get interviewed with some company and they are using Splunk, so they will probably shortlist the guy who is having experience with Splunk rather than the guy having experience with ArcSight. So
Does anybody want to jump on that one before I do?
I can jump on that.
Rishabh?
I think if a hiring manager is looking for a particular technology-related skill set, ArcSight, Splunk, LStack, or anything like that, so they definitely have something in mind.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm a hiring manager and I'm looking for a junior person to start in the team, I would care less about what tool you have worked on, but did you understand what the SIM does?
Yep.
And how to get value out of it? Because all SIM solutions, you have to create use cases.
Yep.
create the baseline and then form the alerts out of that baseline.
Yeah.
So I'll be more interested in that capability rather than the skill set with ArcSight or Splunk or any other tool which is out there.
Yeah.
And that's just me. I don't know if anyone else has a
Yeah, I mean, I'll top up with that as somebody who runs a SOC, and we're a Splunk user. I don't need the mic. So when we go through our technical interview process, we actually say to somebody, like, you know, obviously we're looking for somebody with SIM experience, so we want them to do a demo back to us, and I don't care what SIM technology they use, right? So create a log source, ingest some data, create an alert, show me an event, walk it through the process. You know, demonstrate that you understand that workflow, and if it's Splunk or Sentinel or ArcSight or Macy, I don't really care. To answer the very specific question about where would I invest my skills and development from a technology perspective, ArcSight is a legacy technology and fading fast. And unless you want to go work in government, I would stay away from ArcSight. If you want to work in government, ArcSight's not necessarily a bad choice, right? Or if you want to work for Deloitte, which is a big like ArcSight consulting company, just being completely transparent here. Splunk is very widely deployed, very widely used. There's other technologies that are quite popular, Logarithm, Elk Stack is becoming more popular, those sorts of things. But again, it's about understanding the process rather than a specific technology. I personally like Splunk because it's easy to get started, it's easy to work with stuff, it's fairly agnostic as it relates to different types of data sources, but you know, it really depends on kind of where you're looking. So, yes?
What is the skill set that is in demand these days? That is first question. The second question is the 67 being the retirement age.
Yeah.
People have long way to go.
Yeah.
What is the advice for a mature IT person to transition to cybersecurity?
Yep. Two great questions. I'm going to let the panel take a first crack at it, and then I'll top up.
To answer the second part of your second question there about not being a mature working professional transferring in, I think there's just a tremendous opportunity in that regard. Just in the past few years, I've been very humbled to meet and have a lot of people who just even came out completely non-IT roles and transitioned into cybersecurity. In fact, this morning there's someone who I developed a friendship with in Calgary. She had been in a sales role for a long time. Last year transitioned into sales for a security vendor, and from there she actually is now part of their sort of like solution architecture team. So I think for people who are looking to transfer in, find out what those transferable skills are. Even if that first job in cybersecurity isn't what you want to do, because everything is so dynamic in this workspace, you can job hop quite quickly and get to that spot where you want to be. And again, whether or not that talent crunch does or doesn't exist, regardless, there's boundless opportunities. So as long as you're finding that way in, there's a lot of opportunity to be had there. To answer the first part of your question about sort of what technologies to go down, Mike already talked about a lot of those. Again, just my spin on that is that we're moving away from less of a focus on network-centric security to security happening around sort of the data and the identity. So in those types of areas, and obviously cloud as well, those are very hot-moving areas.
Yep. No, I think those are great answers. Any top-ups from the team? No? Okay. I'll top up a little bit with the age thing. Like, most of us who are gray-haired, who have been in cybersecurity for like 20 years or plus, like, we actually come from something else, right? Like, I came from telecom and networking, and then, like, I took a little bit of a step down, moved over to cybersecurity, and then, rocket ship kind of thing, right? And so, don't be afraid of that transition, right? It may mean you have to go from, senior IT person to intermediate cybersecurity person, and then you're back on another path. But the skills and experience that you have are foundational skills for what you'd require in cybersecurity. So, and that's one of the reasons why, like, for my career talks, I don't just talk about students, it's also career switchers, because we need people from all different fields.
And
yes?
Just to add on to that, anything you learn in IT, like security doesn't magically happen. It still needs to sit on a server. There are IT components still need to be attached to the network. So there are security engineering and security architecture roles which you can easily transition into if you have that systems and network background.
Absolutely. Great.
question is, what sort of certifications, security certifications are in demand? Sorry for being a little bit advanced now.
Okay. Who wants to start on certifications?
Start on that. There's always, again, I think that answer depends on who you ask. I know there's some people who would say, yeah, I'm all about certifications, and they hand you a business card with like 1 million certifications after their last name. I'm more of the practical ilk in which the certifications are useful, and obviously being, keeping your training up to date is very important. But at least from what I've seen from what you need to be able to get past, again, HR or whatever requirements that they have, from an entry level, the Security Plus one, there's other ones as well, but the Security Plus one I've seen as being a fairly consistent one for being able to get in an entry level position. A lot of hiring managers look for that. Same with HR. Security Plus resonates, or resonates the wrong word, but a lot of HR people know what the Security Plus is, and they're actively looking for that. As you get more senior, good or bad, the CISSP is still very much a gold standard. There's the CISM as well, but for the past 10 plus years, the CISSP has been that gold standard, and it still is. So I would very much make sure that starting around those two is really, I think, is important from sort of a short and long-term perspective. And again, depending on if you want to go to a more targeted space, if you want to focus on network penetration testing or what have you, there's different certifications based on the subspecialty in security, but I think those are the sort of two gold standards that we start with.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Any top up from?
So I think first it's very important to decide what your interest would be in. So if you like, just how Dominic said, if you like cloud security, then you can start off with like an AWS practitioner or something like that. If you like ethical hacking, then CEH is a good one. So first, just understanding what your interest is, going down on your strengths and weaknesses and what you want to do. That is an important deciding factor in what certification you would want. Look at the different job descriptions that you want to be in a job. So if you look at different job descriptions across the market, then you can see what are they looking for, what are the skills. But pretty much Security Plus has been a baseline for getting into security. And if you like network, you could go to Network Plus, but the CompTIA one is the basic one to get.
Yeah. So I'd top up a little bit. Look at those HR screening things, right? So unfortunately, a lot of government, large organizations put CISSP on there. Doesn't mean that's necessarily the best certification. It's just what they ask for because everybody asks for it. And so, if you're going for an industry job, it's less important, right? So it really depends. I would say, again, doubling down on Aashna's comment, go and talk to somebody who's working that job in the industry, and they'll tell you what they needed to do to be successful in that job, right? So if they're a penetration tester, it's OSCP and sort of CH and stuff like that. If it's a network engineer, then it might be a vendor certification like a Palo Alto engineer, that kind of thing. If you want to make a lot of money and you like cloud, the AWS Cloud Security Architect right now, they cannot mint those fast enough. There's not enough people with those skill sets, especially if you've got some dev experience as well. Those are 6-figure jobs, and so there's a lot of value in that. So it really depends on kind of what you're chasing in terms of a job and desire. So good question. Next question.
I have one more actually, that this is for my son.
Okay.
A person who is graduating with a non-IT degree, but with just one subject in IT.
Okay.
How that person can transition to this area because of the demand that the sector asks, because the degree that is getting is not a high demanding career.
Is it a technical degree or a non-technical degree?
Science degree.
Science was somewhat technical, right? So the path that I have seen, I'll start and then I'll pass it to the panel. The path that I have seen most successful for people who don't come from any sort of networking or IT or security background to get into security is typically through a GRC path, and then from the GRC path into other roles. So like one of my favorite local security directors, Dragana, she has a degree in criminology, right? So she started working for a company, she did some work in GRC, then now she's leading a team at Mountain Equipment Co-op. You pick up the technical stuff along the way, and she's one of the best people in the field in the local market as far as I'm concerned. So I think what I've experienced at least is if you are trying to come into security and you don't have that technical foundation, then compliance and that kind of stuff is often a very reasonable path. And there's a lot of kind of fairly good entry-level jobs in compliance. You just need to have like a good kind of organizational skills and project management capability and the ability to read a spec and kind of follow a process and stuff like that. And so that would be my feedback, but I'd love to hear from the rest of the team.
Yeah, I echo everything you just said there, and I think the other piece there is that, especially with GRC, to be able to be analytical. You know, and I think
Science, analytical.
No, yeah, that person has done data analytics.
Great.
Yeah, so I mean, I think those, and to Mike's point there, you know, often that seems to be the most common path right now for non-technical people is through the GRC role, and luckily because of different compliance regulations and how that's been growing, there are more and more GRC roles. So it's not like that's a small body to try and crack into. Those are a lot of job openings in those areas as well. So
yeah.
I would say they're equally as in demand.
Yeah. Specifically, since you said data analytics, there is a lot of subspecialty domain demand for data analytics people. And Vancouver is actually a really good town for data analytics. There's Splunk and Amazon and others that are doing data analytics work. So it's possible that they could parachute directly into a data analytics security role without having to go through different intermediate steps. If they've spent a reasonable amount of time, like if they understand ML and training models and all this kind of stuff, then they're probably in good shape to find an entry-level data analytics engineer position. So, next question. Yes?
Hi, I just want to add to the one which the case you just mentioned about. So I can relate to that because I have done my bachelor's degree in instrumentation and control engineering.
Yep.
After that, I worked in industry for cybersecurity in the GRC domain for about 2.5 years.
Yep.
I'm pursuing my master's at the moment, so now I'm looking for a more streamlined role in the forensics.
Okay.
That's what I'm looking at. So, but the point where now I'm stuck is my previous resume does not resonate with the role now what I'm looking at it.
Right.
So forensics
you're making almost a career shift kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, the point where I'm stuck is like when they ask me like technical skills.
Yep.
And that for me is not matching up. So what would you suggest for me to go about that so that I'm looking at a career?
So I think particular to your situation, even you're doing highly technical forensics skill, it does have the governance on the backbone of it.
Yeah.
So you can't just go on and log into someone's mailbox and start collecting evidence. The governance part of would be, do you have the go from privacy officer to do that? Do you have the go from controller to do that? Do you have the go from HR to do that? So don't get me wrong, like it still has a very heavy governance part, and you'll be surprised how many companies don't know that.
Yeah.
They'll start collecting the evidence left, right, and center. They don't know that these checks need to be in place. So every security related thing that happens has a heavy governance, risk, and compliance factor associated with it. So although someone might not be able to see it right from the get-go, but once you start digging into it, there's always a GRC component to everything practical that we do.
Yep.
Like we're there for a reason. Like all we're trying to do is mitigate risk, right? So that GRC component is always there.
Any top up on that? I want to actually put a warning out there specifically as it relates to forensics. One of my concerns as it relates to all the people who are graduating from cybersecurity right now is a lot of the programs specifically center around forensics, right? So you can do a 2-year program in forensics at BCIT and NYIT and all these different schools. How many of you actually have studied forensics as part of your program? A good number of hands. There probably more hands went up in this room than there are full-time forensics practitioners in Vancouver right now. And so what this kind of highlights my concern is if you want to get into forensics, again, like going back to the very opening of you need to find a way to stand above the crowd, that is a very specialized subdomain within computer security. And so you have to recognize that there's probably 30 or 40 full-time practitioners in all of the province. Half a dozen of them might work for Gary's team in the OCIO. There might be 1 or 2 working for Hydro, 1 or 2 working for major financial institutions and stuff like that. There just aren't that many type of that role. So you need to figure out ways to go the extra mile, right? Like again, build your network, sit down with the forensics people. You're going to have to learn the technical skills as well as the non-technical skills. And you might not be able to get there in a direct linear step. You might need to find a path into an organization that maybe has forensics as a function where you're doing something adjacent to forensics and you start practicing the skill and then you grow into the role full time, right? So it's just, I caution everybody, like they see CSI Cyber or whatever those crappy programs are, and they go, I'm going to be a forensic scientist. And it's like, great, just be very awareful. Like VPD, right? Like big organization, they had 2 forensics people doing all of their cell phone unlocks and stuff like that for the entire province, right? So it's not a large organization, and just go into that with your eyes wide open. So, yeah. Sorry, I don't want to dissuade anybody from doing anything they're passionate about. Just, you need to bring your full force of your personality at it. So, next question?
Since you're talking about the research in forensics, digital forensics, and cybersecurity, do you think it's a waste of time to do a program like that since you have to do the forensics in there? Or do you think it's worth it? Or what kind of schooling would you recommend?
Since I walked into that, does anyone else want to answer it first?
I would say, I think there are 2, so I'm doing a part-time MBA right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one of my colleagues sitting right in front of me. And I think college education or education in general has 2 components of it. One is to give you enough understanding or education about what could be out there in terms of these other various areas and expose you to them and to see that which one do you like doing. And the second part of education is that if you choose to pursue a particular thing, to give you enough tools and skill sets so you can go down that path successfully.
Yeah.
So the forensics part of the program may not be so you become a forensics analytics if it doesn't interest you. There are other parts of the components of the program which might interest you. So institutions are looking at what's the hot skill right now in the market, and Michael said that there are very few forensics people, like true forensics people. So they're looking at the market outlook, what will make you more job worthy once you're done. So the college is not doing a discredit, it's just opening up to you different avenues which you can pursue.
Yeah.
Does that answer that question?
I'm going to top up a little bit. So, as I said, there's very few full-time forensics positions, and I'm going to let 2 of you top up as well. That doesn't mean that forensics isn't an aspect of other jobs, right? So, for example, if you're a SOC incident responder, you may not do forensics full-time, but you may do it as part of your job, as part of IR, right? If you work for Nokia in their malware research lab, right? You may not be doing forensics full-time, but the skill set that you learn doing the forensic study will still be valuable to you in that job, right? So there are a lot of jobs where the forensic skills are applied, but they aren't forensics roles, right? And so understanding that, and understanding that you're picking up a skill set in the same way that, like, just because you're learning networking doesn't mean you're going to be a network engineer, right? You're picking up these skills that will slot into the job of the future, because none of the jobs that exist today are going to exist in 10 years. They're all changing all the time, right? And so, you know, the purpose of the education isn't to like slot you perfectly into a job like lock and key. It's to give you a bunch of foundational skills that you can then build upon when you're in your career. So
That helps a lot.
yeah. Any other top up from my other esteemed panelists?
No.
VCIT is great, by the way. Great program. Lots of students working in the industry. So, next question. All right. I guess we've drained the audience. Oh no, sorry, one more.
So I have worked at Accenture for 6 years, and now I'm pursuing a master's degree program at NIIT for cybersecurity.
Mm-hmm.
So, like while being a student, I want to work somewhere related to my field.
Yeah.
But there are no part-time things available in the field of IT or cybersecurity or pen testing, maybe something related to hands-on experience. Could you just give me a guidance if that's possible too?
Is it possible to find part-time work while you're a student in your field?
Yes.
Yes, but it's not easy. And
or volunteer.
Yeah, or volunteer. I mean, there's certainly volunteer opportunities. I'll let maybe somebody else jump in first, and then I'll.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think there is a lot of opportunity, especially with smaller like nonprofits or small startups. even small businesses like mom and pop shops. There's always opportunities to just be able to volunteer some help there, even if it's just like basic cybersecurity advice or guidance. I think that there's definitely opportunity there. You definitely have to work hard at trying to find those opportunities. There's definitely a lot of effort into doing that, but it's certainly not an impossible mission.
Yeah. I'm sorry, does anybody else want to top up before we move on to the next question?
You can look for part-time opportunities, but also look at internships and co-ops. So they might be not labeled as part-time, but they might be, start off with an internship and then probably talk to them about your hours of schooling and then try to convince them that they can keep you part-time. But you can start off with an internship or a co-op in your program and then go on from there.
Are there any that don't tell you to like less than 20 hours? Because as far as I have seen, I research a lot, but I think all of them say that we give you work for 40 hours a week.
There are a few, but they're really hard to find.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'd rather that you get in there and you get out, or you become a full-time worker.
Yeah, I think this is back to the networking one-on-one thing, which is like, they exist, you have to work your network pretty hard to find them. Sometimes it's like, you build a really good relationship with somebody and they're willing to give you a chance on a part-time basis. That job doesn't exist, but you can find a way to get that job created for you, right? If you've built a relationship somewhere. I will use this particular commercial break to say, I'm hiring my first intern. Go to kobalt.io/intern. It's a paid intern position. The idea is 4 months in a SOC team. You're gonna learn a lot of skills. We're going to give you a reference. We're going to train you on interview skills, and then set you free in the market. It's going to be a rotating position. So anybody who's interested in an intern position, get in touch with me. And other.
Yeah, I have a question. Because during the whole presentations, we were talking about cybersecurity, and it is 24 hours. The threats are coming 24 hours.
Yeah.
But from all the discussions and from all my experience, what I have seen is the jobs are weekdays 8 to 5. Is it like that?
Who wants
because
to?
cybersecurity professionals are working only 8 to 5
Yes.
and only weekdays. Is it?
So some are and some aren't. Some and the art ones are like more rotational shifts. So
Yep.
people working in the SOC, they are usually on a rotation shift. So you'll have 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, 3 shifts. So those are the 24-hour threat. People looking at big dashboard with all the alerts going on left, right, and center, lights blinking everywhere, and trying to address that. More of an 8 to 4 jobs are related to just keeping the lights on and the background piece of it. But the active threat management, those jobs, like I think Michael will be able to tell you more about it because he runs a company which delivers that service. So those are usually 24 hours, 24/7.
Yeah, and I mean, there's ways that organizations build towards it. So if you think about IT operations, right? Like a lot of IT operations start off as being 9 to 5, right? But then somebody has a pager, right? So a lot of security teams work very similarly. It's like, if there's a heavy-duty alert, then somebody will get paged. But other than that, it's kind of a traditional 9 to 5 job. A lot of organizations run not so much 24 hours in Canada, for example, but they might run, East Coast, West Coast, India, other places and stuff like that. Global organizations are becoming more and more common. But yeah, there are true, proper 24/7 SOCs operating here and in other places. It's not common, but they exist. Yeah. I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll wrap up. So in the back, you were first.
How do you know when you should switch a job? Because I got my first IT job, and it's nice, and I'm learning other things, but I'm wondering, okay, how long am I staying here and I'm staying stuck? When should I move to try to find another position? Or am I rushing it too fast?
Who wants to start?
I can share just from my experience when I knew and the times that I did change. So I knew that again, there's different factors that go into what makes the job enjoyable. Sometimes it's what is the commute. So with my first job, because I had to get a job, it was all the way in Richmond. I don't live anywhere near Richmond, literally nowhere near Richmond. And it took me like an hour and a half to get there, and I was on a good day. So after 3 years, I was worn down and I had aged considerably. So I decided I wanted to work somewhere closer to home. That was the deciding factor for that one. And once, when my next role, I hit more of a glass ceiling. I felt like I wasn't being actively challenged and there was an opportunity for growth. So the reason there, again, I left was for a different reason. I wasn't being challenged. I went to work for a consulting company, and I worked there for a bit. And the reason I left there was, for me, it was like working at a slaughterhouse. I looked behind the walls I wasn't supposed to, and I saw how the sausage was made, and I was damaged for life. So I ended up leaving there. And so for me, I always like to say to people, they say, when do you know when to leave? I would just say, you'll know, and again, the reasons you leave are going to be very different each time. But think again, from a life perspective, from a work perspective, there are those factors that go into it. And sort of a little exercise that I started to do back in my corporate days was I always had a running list of reasons I love my job and reasons I hate my job. Starting from job one until I finished my corporate career, the way I knew it was time was when the reasons I hate my job, when there was more in that column than there was in the reasons I love my job. So
Cool.
yeah.
Any other top-ups from Rashad?
So, what kind of freelancing careers are possible in cybersecurity?
There's a lot of freelancing. There literally recruiters will literally push their grandmother down the flight of stairs to find someone. There are so many, not to crap on recruiters, but there are so many contract opportunities out there that literally recruiters cannot find enough talented security people. I get called by recruiters probably 4 or 5 times a week, and I even get recruiters saying, "Hey, you look really qualified for this junior role." So I usually hang up on them, but there's so much great opportunity for contract opportunities
Like,
as well.
Penetration tester.
I see a full gamut, from pretty much everything.
Some other terms, could you just?
I see opportunities as, if you want to be like a contract security analyst, if you want to come do a pen test, vulnerability assessment.
Compliance work.
Yeah, compliance work, application security, it literally covers the full gamut. Just because, again, whether or not that talent shortage does or doesn't exist, the fact is the matter that it's really hard for organizations to place people, and recruiters are literally fighting to find people to get into those positions.
Yep. I'm gonna wrap it up here because I know there's other sessions to get to and stuff like that. Thank you so much for your time, and hopefully you've learned something useful.